The night before I flew home from Chicago, I almost canceled my trip. Not because of weather, not because of work, just a feeling, that low, nameless dread that settles somewhere between your chest and your stomach and refuses to explain itself. I'd had it before, usually before something went wrong. A car accident I'd narrowly avoided. A job offer I'd accepted too quickly and regretted for 2 years after. My body knew things my brain hadn't caught up to yet. But I talked myself out of it. My mom was waiting. She'd just had a hip replacement 3 weeks earlier, and I promised her I'd be there for Thanksgiving. I wasn't going to bail on her because of a feeling, so I packed my carry-on, called a cab at 4 in the morning, and headed to O'Hare. The flight was supposed to be 2 hours, Dallas to Shreveport after a layover, nothing complicated. I'd done this route a dozen times for work. I knew which gate had the best coffee, which security line moved fastest, which seats on the regional jet had the most legroom for someone my height. I'm 5'9". I've learned to be strategic about these things. I got to my gate early, which almost never happens. I had 40 minutes to kill, so I bought a breakfast sandwich I didn't really want and sat near the window watching the ground crew load bags onto a plane that wasn't mine. There's something almost meditative about that. Watching strangers do repetitive, important work in the dark before sunrise. Nobody at the gate was really talking. Everyone had that early morning airport silence, headphones in, coffees clutched like life preservers. I remember thinking, this is fine, everything is fine, you're overthinking again. I boarded early because I'd checked in online and gotten a decent seat. 14A, window. I settled in, pulled out my book, and started the mental math of whether I could fall asleep before we even taxied. That's when I noticed her. The flight attendant, she was working the back of the plane, doing the pre-boarding walkthrough. Mid-40s, efficient movements, the kind of professional calm you earn after years in that job. She glanced at me as she passed, and I thought nothing of it. People glance at each other. It's normal. But then she came back. She stopped at my row, leaned slightly over the empty middle seat, and spoke quietly enough that the man across the aisle couldn't have heard her over his podcast. "Ma'am, do you mind if I see your boarding pass for a second?" I handed it over. She looked at it, looked at me, and something shifted in her expression, subtle. The way someone's face changes when they're recalculating something. "Thank you," she said. She handed it back, smiled, and moved on. Weird, but not alarming. Not yet. We took off on time. The flight was smooth. I read 4 chapters of my book and ate a pack of peanuts and was almost relaxed by the time the seatbelt sign clicked off. Then she appeared again. She crouched in the aisle beside my seat, not standing over me, but crouching, low, so her face was level with mine. Close enough that I could see she wasn't smiling this time. "I need to ask you something," she said very quietly, "and I need you to stay calm." My stomach dropped. "There are 2 men in row 22 who have been watching you since you boarded," she said. "I don't know why. But I've done this job for 19 years, and something is wrong. They've been taking photos of you with a phone. They know your name. I heard one of them say it when I walked past." I turned toward the aisle instinctively, and she put her hand on my armrest. "Don't look back," she said. "Please. Just listen." My mouth had gone dry. "How did they know my name? I don't know, but I need you to do exactly what I'm about to tell you." She reached into her apron pocket and placed a folded cocktail napkin on my tray table. "There's a gate agent named Marcus at the Shreveport terminal. If anything feels wrong when we land, anything, you find him and you show him this." I looked at the napkin. She'd written something on it in blue pen. A name. A code. A 4-digit number. "Who are you?" I asked. She stood up, adjusted her jacket, and was already moving back down the aisle before she answered over her shoulder, barely audible. Someone who's been watching longer than they have. "I want to tell you that I immediately did the logical thing. Called the flight marshal, told another crew member. created some kind of scene that would have resolved everything quickly and cleanly. I didn't. I sat very still and I tried to remember how to breathe normally. There's this thing that happens to your body when it processes a threat that your brain hasn't fully accepted yet. Your hands go cold. Your vision gets slightly sharper, like someone adjusted the contrast. You become hyper-aware of sound. I could hear the man 2 rows ahead of me turning pages in a magazine, the low mechanical hum of the cabin, a child whimpering softly somewhere behind me. I didn't look back. I wanted to more than almost anything, but I didn't. Instead, I opened my phone and pretended to scroll through photos. I angled the camera slightly and switched it to selfie mode so I could see the rows behind me in the reflection. Row 22 was 6 rows back. 2 men. One was maybe 50, heavy-set, gray-streaked hair, watching the window. The other was younger, 30s, dark jacket, and he was looking directly at the back of my headrest. Looking at me. My phone slipped. I caught it. I set it face down on my tray table and stared at the clouds outside the window and thought about my mother waiting at the airport, leaning on her cane, probably already annoyed that I hadn't texted her an update. I thought, she doesn't know where I am right now. Not exactly. She knows the flight number. That's it. I thought, nobody knows I'm sitting in seat 14A right now except the airline, and apparently 2 strangers in row 22. I folded the napkin and put it in my coat pocket. The flight attendant, her name tag said Vivian, didn't come back to my row for the rest of the flight. I caught her eye once, near the front galley, and she gave me a look that I can only describe as deliberate. She was watching. She just couldn't do it, obviously. I spent 40 minutes running through every scenario I could think of. Maybe I was misidentifying myself as the target. Seat 14A. What if they were watching someone who'd originally been in the seat and had switched? What if there had been a last-minute seating change and I'd unwittingly sat down into someone else's problem? What if this was some kind of mistake? A case of mistaken identity. The word they'd apparently used. My name circled back. My actual name. Not a mispronunciation. Not a similar name. Mine. How? I booked this ticket 6 weeks ago. One way, because I wasn't sure how long I'd need to stay with my mom. I paid with my credit card. Standard stuff. No one should have access to passenger manifests except the airline and, under certain circumstances, law enforcement. That thought sat in my stomach like something rotten. What if it was law enforcement? What if someone had flagged me incorrectly for something? I'd heard of it happening. Mistaken identity. Wrong name on a list. People detained for hours at airports because of clerical errors or a name that matched someone else's. But law enforcement officers don't take photos on personal cell phones and whisper your name to each other across an aisle. That's not procedure. Whatever this was, it wasn't official. We landed 13 minutes early. The seatbelt sign came on and everyone around me did that thing where they immediately stand up despite the plane still moving. I stayed seated. I was in no hurry to step into the aisle with those 2 men still somewhere behind me. Vivian appeared at the front of the cabin with the other attendant, doing the standard post-landing routine, thanking passengers as they filed out. But as I finally stood and pulled my carry-on from the overhead bin, she materialized beside me. Just for a second, just long enough to say very quietly, practically into my collar, "Marcus, information desk, main terminal. Don't stop anywhere else first." Then she was gone, back to her professional smile, gesturing toward the forward exit. I walked off that plane and I felt the 2 men from row 22 somewhere behind me. I didn't look, I just walked. The Shreveport Regional Airport is not large. It's one of those smaller regional airports where you can see almost everything from almost anywhere, which was simultaneously comforting and alarming. No crowd to disappear into, but also no crowd for anyone else to disappear into. I found the information desk in under 3 minutes. Marcus was real. He was a heavy-set black man in his 50s, airport polo shirt, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, eating what appeared to be a very late breakfast burrito. He looked up when I approached. "Can I help you?" I put the napkin on the counter. He looked at it. His expression didn't change exactly, but something in his eyes did. He straightened up. "Put down the burrito." "When did she give you this?" "Midway through the flight." He nodded slowly. "Okay, come around here." He lifted a section of the counter. "Now, please." I spent the next 2 hours in a back office that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. Marcus made calls I wasn't supposed to hear, and I sat in a plastic chair and tried to text my mom something that wouldn't terrify her. Flight was delayed, be there soon. It wasn't a lie, exactly. Not exactly. 2 uniformed officers arrived first, then a woman in plain clothes who introduced herself only as someone from the TSA's Behavioral Detection Unit and did not elaborate further. They showed me photographs on a laptop. I identified the 2 men from the plane immediately. The younger one's real name, they told me eventually, was someone I'd never heard of. But his connection was to someone I had heard of, my ex-husband's business partner. A man named Donovan, who I had last spoken to 14 months ago outside a courtroom in Houston after I'd testified about financial irregularities I'd witnessed during my 4 years working as an accountant at the firm where my ex-husband had been a partner. I testified willingly. I thought it was over. It wasn't over. Donovan had apparently believed, incorrectly, that I had retained copies of certain documents I had not retained. He'd hired someone to confirm my travel schedule. It wasn't hard. My ex-husband still had access to details he shouldn't have. And these 2 men were supposed to follow me, confirm I was alone, and determine where I was staying. "And then what?" I asked. The woman from the TSA looked at me steadily. "That's what we're still working on," she said. My mother didn't find out the full story until 3 days later, when I finally told her over coffee at her kitchen table. She listened without interrupting, which is unusual for her, and then she was quiet for a long moment, stirring her decaf even though she'd stopped putting sugar in it years ago. "That woman on the plane," she finally said. "Vivian?" "Yes." "She didn't have to do that." "No," I said. "She didn't." I'd asked Marcus about her at the airport. He'd been careful in how he answered. Something about the nature of her role, her history. The way certain people in certain positions sometimes develop an eye for things that others don't see. He said she'd flagged situations before. He said she knew who to call. I don't know exactly who Vivian is. I don't know if I ever will. She wasn't working that flight again by the time I went back to ask questions, and the airline's HR department is not in the habit of connecting passengers with crew members for personal reasons. But I think about her constantly. 19 years in that job. 19 years of watching people. Of reading the cabin the way some people read rooms, sensing the shift in air pressure before the storm, trusting something that has no name but is completely real. She saw 2 men watching a woman, and she did something about it. Quietly, efficiently, without making it a scene or making me feel hysterical for believing her. She gave me a napkin with a name and a number on it, and that napkin is the reason I was sitting at my mother's kitchen table drinking bad coffee 3 days later instead of something I don't let myself think about too directly. Donovan was arrested 6 weeks after Thanksgiving on charges unrelated to me as part of a broader federal investigation that had apparently been building for some time. His 2 men were questioned and released but placed on a watch list I was told nothing more about. My ex-husband called me in January. I let it go to voicemail. I have not called back. I don't plan to. There are things this experience changed in me and things it confirmed. It confirmed that the feeling I'd had the night before, that nameless low dread, was not nothing. It had never been nothing. I'd spent my whole adult life apologizing for it, explaining it away, feeling embarrassed by a nervous system that seemed to be receiving signals on a frequency no one else could hear. It changed the way I board planes now, the way I notice who's around me, who's looking, who's not looking too deliberately in another direction. It changed the way I think about strangers who take small, quiet risks on behalf of people they've never met. Vivian didn't know me. She owed me nothing. She had no way of knowing whether her instinct was right or whether I'd think she was unhinged and complain to her supervisor. She just looked at something that felt wrong, decided it was worth acting on, and acted. I think about that more than almost anything. Most of us spend our lives calibrating how much to speak up versus how much to stay quiet, how much to trust our gut versus how much to defer to the possibility that we're wrong. And the answer, I've come to believe, is that you trust it more than you think you should. You say the thing, you hand over the napkin. You crouch down in the aisle at 30,000 feet and speak quietly to a stranger who might not believe you. Because sometimes the stranger believes you, and sometimes that matters more than you'll ever fully be able to explain. A few months after everything settled, I sent flowers to the airline's Chicago O'Hare hub with a note for Vivian, care of the crew scheduling office. I didn't know if it would reach her. I still don't know if it did. The note said, "I don't know how to thank you properly, so I'm just going to tell you that I went home. I sat at my mom's kitchen table. I had coffee. I'm okay. I think you should know that." I signed it with my real name. Because she already knew it anyway. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that day. Not in any abstract philosophical way, just in the plain practical sense of tracing a line backward from where I ended up to every small decision that got me there. If I hadn't testified 14 months earlier, Donovan wouldn't have seen me as a loose end. If I hadn't been honest about what I'd witnessed, the irregular transfers, the numbers that didn't add up, the things I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen, none of it would have followed me onto that plane. And for a while after it happened, I'll admit I sat with that. I wondered whether honesty had been worth it, whether doing the right thing had simply made me a target. But here's what I kept coming back to. The same honesty that made me a target is exactly what Vivian responded to when she looked at my face and decided I was worth the risk of speaking up. I don't know how to explain that except to say that the kind of person you are tends to determine the kind of help you receive. Not always. Not perfectly. But often enough to matter. Vivian had 19 years of reading people. She'd learned through repetition and experience, and probably some close calls of her own, to trust what she noticed. That's not luck. That's the result of paying attention over a long period of time, even when paying attention is inconvenient, even when it would be easier to walk past and let someone else handle it. She had built something in herself, a kind of moral clarity that kicked in before her fear did, and when it mattered, she used it. I think about that as a standard I want to hold myself to. It would have been so easy for her to decide it wasn't her problem. She had a flight to finish, passengers to attend to, protocols to follow. The two men in row 22 hadn't technically done anything she could report through official channels. She had no proof. Only a feeling, and feelings are easy to dismiss, especially when acting on them carries professional risk. She acted anyway. That's what courage actually looks like in real life. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's a woman crouching in an airplane aisle, speaking quietly, handing over a folded napkin, and walking away without knowing whether any of it will make a difference. And Marcus, a man eating a breakfast burrito at an information desk in a small regional airport, looked at that napkin, put down his food, and immediately knew what to do. Because he'd been ready. Because someone had thought to prepare him. Because quiet systems of care, built by people who take their responsibilities seriously, sometimes work exactly the way they're supposed to. What I took from all of it was this. The feeling I'd had the night before wasn't weakness. It wasn't anxiety or irrationality or something to be managed and suppressed. It was information, and learning to treat your instincts as information rather than inconvenience. That might be one of the most practical and necessary skills a person can develop. I'm still working on it. I probably always will be. But I think about that napkin whenever I'm tempted to talk myself out of something I know is true. Someone else trusted their gut on my behalf once. The least I can do is extend the same courtesy to myself.